I'm with the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, and I'm a permit writer and a ZIPD's permit writer for the Surface Water Protection Division. But obviously I do other things than that. Among many of those other things, I also administer the 604B grant program. Let's see. Let me get to the right screen so I can actually change my slides. There we go. Cool. So I'm just going to go over some of the basics of the 604B program. What is it? Who can apply? What can we fund with it? And I'll give you a few examples of the projects that we've funded so far. So Section 604B program is funded by the EPA. It's mandated by the Clean Water Act, the Section 604B, which is why it's called that. And it funds planning activities under Sections 205 and 303 of the Clean Water Act. So it provides approximately 1% of revolving funds allotments to support state water quality planning activities. So what that means is that the amount of funding available each year changes a little bit depending on what's allotted to the states. We've had as little as $67,000 available for this grant, and we've had as much as almost $170,000 available for this grant. So it can be variable. And there's also, of that money, there's $40,000 that goes as pass-through funding for the designated planning agencies in the state. This is just a little talking about sort of showing how the money is carved up between in the bipartisan infrastructure law, also known as bill. That gave us a little bit more funding, which is why we bumped up from the 67,000 to approximately 168 this past year. It's been a little stepwise in there, but it's definitely given us some more funding. But along with that infrastructure law also came some other guidelines. So since the 2021 bill, there's also EPA has encouraged us to work on integrating equity, environmental justice, and climate change. So there's a higher emphasis on those considerations. Who is eligible? So technically, the EPA answer is regional public comprehensive planning organizations and appropriate interstate organizations. So it's not super clear, but basically it's any of the designated planning agencies that we have across the state, but also counties, council of governments, conservation districts, towns, pretty much anything that is one of our government entities on some level is eligible to apply. Historically, we've funded projects that have involved improving stormwater systems, determining ways to expand green infrastructure programs, determining point source pollution issues. But like I said, we're also, since 2022, really trying to push equity and climate change to be major considerations in these grants as well. And before I go too far along, the eligibility question has always been an issue for people. We've had several funded applications that are basically written and done by consultants or NGOs working with towns, right? So you have to have that government organization. And I want to go into some of the examples of recipients. I think this helps to make it more clear what kind of stuff we're funding. We funded a septic system location study for Central Arizona governments, and they've been using those funds to create some maps and to do a real, a full assessment of their septic systems, looking at age of systems and a lot of those different things that need to be considered when thinking about your septic systems. Town of Kearney, this is a very different type of project that we funded. They just were having a really difficult time keeping fish alive in their lake, and they wanted to know why, and they just didn't have the funding for a full assessment. So this is what they asked for, and they were able to hire a consultant to come in and write a whole assessment of what the problem probably is and to give suggestions on how to move forward. We've got the town of Pinetop Lakeside had a really interesting, they're working on watershed and water quality assessments, but they're doing a huge part of their project is also outreach. They're reaching out to students, they're reaching out to the community. So it's a really interesting integrated project that's really trying to involve the community in the process. They've got people out there sampling, you know, not just people, but like citizens out sampling water and doing stuff like that, which is pretty neat. And we've got NACOG working on a watershed view assessment for their stormwater infiltration. And they've done a really good job so far of really involving many different stakeholders and levels of stakeholders. And then this year we've just funded City of Prescott to work on creating green stormwater infrastructure plans so that they have these plans up and ready to go when they're able to put them in. So I'm looking forward to seeing how those turn out. They've literally just last week gotten their agreements signed. And then Luna Lake in Apache County, we've funded them to look at, again, it's mostly their septic systems, but trying to determine what they need to do to have a healthy lake. They've had an increase in harmful algal blooms. So these are the kinds of projects that we've been funding so far. I would normally when I talk about 604B, I say to keep an eye on our AZDEQ page, but we maybe a month or two ago, our page got hacked and we're basically having to rebuild everything from the bricks up. So it is not on our webpage right now, but you can email me for information about it. Hopefully we'll get that up and running again. So in the slides, I also give a link to the 604B information from EPA here. Again, I've got this marked out because that's not going to get you to our webpage right now, unfortunately. And then I know we're running a little bit behind on time, but it's a pretty short talk. But I also wanted to mention that we'll be sending out RFP, request for proposals, for the OSG program. And that's for sewer and stormwater, sewer overflow and stormwater reuse. And that's going to be a grant program for so the main thing to remember with the 604B is that it's all for planning. It's only for planning your projects. It's not for implementation. The OSG grant, however, is for implementation. It can be also for planning, but it is for implementation. Which if you're somebody that has gotten a 604B grant and you've planned your project, this would pair nicely with that. So keep an eye out for that also. And I'll have more information about that. So the big takeaway, I think that's my last slide, but the big takeaway is have my email address is going to be the way to find out more information about these grants. So, and with that, I can close my talk out and open it up for questions.